Of Political Science at George Mason University. She joins us live from Fairfax, Virginia. Thanks very much for being with us this evening, Jennifer. We heard there now from Patty Culhane looking at some of the people who did not attend that address by Prime Minister Netanyahu in Congress. She called it a seismic shift. What is your view on that?
No, I think that's exactly right. What we've seen over the last year since the conflict in Israel began on October 9th is a really severe fracture within the Democratic Party, where on the one hand, the Democratic Party, the coalition, includes a lot of Jewish members. You know, most Jews in the United States are more likely to identify as Democrats rather than Republicans. But the Democratic coalition also includes Muslim populations and Palestinians and Arabs and others who may be more likely to side or sort of be sympathetic to the Palestinian cause than the Israeli cause. And this has caused a huge fracture within the Democratic Party that Joe Biden has been trying to balance. He took a lot of criticism for it with all of those university protests through the winter and spring. And he just sort of waited them out, and then universities went on summer break. It'll be interesting to see what happens as we come back in the fall. The situation politically here now in the U.S. with Joe Biden stepping down is different. One thing that I think encapsulates that fracture as I see it in the Democratic Party was a tweet, and I wish I could attribute it, and I don't remember. I didn't save it, but it was a young American activist, presumably college student, who had tweeted out that she was going to be ready to protest President Harris the day after Inauguration Day, January 21st, 2025. But until then, she was going to work hard to elect her. And that was the idea that resonated with me. It's a savvy young person who understands that politics is not always about getting what you want, but it's about building coalitions and then asking to get your needs met.
The White House appears to want to get the ceasefire on track, and we see Netanyahu meeting with everyone he possibly can, potentially to appear to Israelis that he has the United States behind him. Do you think he's achieved that in the last 24 hours and potentially in the next day or two as he continues that visit?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's important to appreciate that not only does the Biden-Harris team have a sort of political fracture within their own political coalition that they are dealing with on this issue, but Netanyahu very much has a similar kind of situation back home where a majority of Israelis are against his leadership at this moment, and yet his leadership coalition, these hardline right wingers, are very much in favor of him going forward. And really making sure that they destroy Hamas before any ceasefire or any other agreement is made. And that's a very difficult place politically for a person to be. Netanyahu certainly has been more sort of in favor of or siding with or taking the behaviors consistent with what his ruling coalition would like to see happen. But interestingly, the Israeli parliament is going to be going out of session for several weeks here. And it'll be interesting to see if that gives Netanyahu any kind of wiggle room or room in order to engage in some negotiation or to perhaps even accept the terms of an agreement. We'll be looking for that.
As this drags on, ultimately, tens of thousands of Palestinians are struggling. Do you think that there might be increased attention to their plight when there's so much emphasis on the politics of the situation?
Yeah, I think we are increasingly seeing that. That's certainly the main message that I think all of the student activity that we saw in the spring was really focused on. Unfortunately, that protest behavior that we saw that resulted in some vandalism yesterday in Washington, D.C. didn't seem quite as focused on that. And I think we saw Vice President Harris reacting to that to some extent. But I would certainly expect that I had also seen a previous statement, and I can't date it right now, but a previous statement from Kamala Harris that was much more sympathetic towards Palestinian plight and recognizing the tens of thousands, almost 40,000 deaths now that have been attributed to the war in Palestine, deaths of Palestinians, I mean. And if it is the case that Kamala Harris is going to try to hold her coalition together by showing more sympathy and showing more acknowledgement of the terrible violence and potential war crimes that we've seen now in that part of the world, that will present an interesting shift from what the official White House position, and whether or not that gives her any difficulty in holding together any potential ceasefire agreement that might be coming. We'll have to wait and see.
All right, Jennifer Victor, Professor of Political Science at George Mason University, thank you very much for your time and your insights.
My pleasure.